Cameron's here, but she said she's just here to listen. But Cameron, you're more than welcome to join in at any time too. We'll give people a couple more minutes if they want to join. If not, Kara will have us all to herself. And she can talk as much as she wants. Oh, you're muted.
I don't need any details, so if it's just for me, I'll just.
Well, you would have our undivided attention, my friend, so you can go nuts.
I'm totally happy with everything that's happening. So.
There were a lot of good responses to the survey, though.
Yeah, Aniket put it in a nice, here's Aniket now. He put it in a nice chart that he sent to Jim and I, so I'll just forward that to everybody.
Yeah, I think he sent it.
Oh, did he?
Did
you get it too? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that led me to my dumb question, which was, it's like DEFCON 1 versus DEFCON 5. Like, is a 1 good and a 5 is bad? But it looked like the higher score was higher priority, right? So the higher total score something got, right? Like if you're putting them in order of priority, then maybe priority number 1.
Anna looked at the questions. I didn't look at the questions.
5 was want to pay most attention to and want to dedicate funds to and discuss, and 1 was I think it was like no further attention needed, feel good about it. And 3 was somewhere in the middle of those.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Oh, I see your question there, Jill. Okay, so it looks like we have Aniket, Jerry, Mia, and Jill. Mia, did you get sworn in? Is that the right way to say it? Did you take your oath of board member office?
I did.
So
I did.
Just making sure you're officially a board member. Mm-hmm. Because since you are, that gives us 4 board members. So we have to call the board or one of you will have to call the meeting to order because it is a public meeting, and kind of facilitate it. So one of you can step up to do that, or I could nominate somebody to do it, or we could go by seniority, which I think Jerry would have the seniority there since Jim, Aaron, and Andrew aren't here.
Seriously, I have the seniority.
You do, Jerry.
Okay. So I'm not sure what to say. I call the meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. Libby, take it away.
Thanks, Chair. So we have a few members of the public on. I believe the board's purpose for this meeting was to hear from community members, and it's wide open. And I see 3 or 4 community members on here in addition to the board. So you all have our boards and myself's ear. Grant Geisler, our business manager, is also on the call. So if you're a community member, this is pretty low key with so little people here, or so few people here. So by all means, unmute yourself and speak up unless one of the board members wants to do this a different way.
No, that's fine. I think if we are struggling to pull folks out, then I could certainly go over some of the things we heard from the survey to see if that elicits any reactions from folks. But I see a head nodding. Okay.
I can say from my side, that's the most exciting part. How much that interest that gathered and what the responses were. I'm a community member, live in Montpelier, but I don't have kids in the school system. So I think it's really interesting to see what priorities parents have, over somebody like me who's just interested. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I wonder if there's a way that we could show some of the bigger bucket responses. I mean, what I went through and sort of summarized was the the commentary. So there were the first main part of the survey was a rating scale of some of the priorities. I think there were probably about 10 different sort of high level buckets of information, and folks were asked to rank those by priority. And then there was also sort of a free form response of things that maybe hadn't been addressed in one of those categories that folks wanted to make sure that we addressed. So I don't know if we can show that.
I have a question. The email said that this was a budget town meeting. Is that not right? A budget town hall.
More for the board to gather community input towards the budget. So the district will be presenting our initial budget to the school board at the December 2nd meeting. And that's where Grant Geisler and myself and the principals and administrators will be showing a PowerPoint of where we believe we'd like to put some money towards, or where we are right now and what our ed spending and that kind of thing is projected to be. That presentation will be repeated multiple times to the board and the community as our numbers firm up more. But part of the board's responsibility is to gather community input into the budget. And this is part of the way that they're satisfying that.
Thank you.
Jill, would you like to?
Sure. And is the survey closed? Is that right? Or we could open it back up, I suppose, if there was demand. So some of the main priority items that folks were asked to weigh in on and rank included classroom instruction, foreign language, art education, special education, early childhood education, outdoor education, social emotional well-being of students, improvement to facilities, diversity, equity, and inclusion, food services, career center and tech ed, college prep programs, and co-curricular and athletics. And I think in both the responses and then also in the free form, it certainly seems like the social, emotional, and mental health support for students is definitely one of the things that folks want to make sure we focus on, and also diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then the free form responses that folks got they were able to be a little bit more in depth. So there were questions about the pandemic response and ventilation, which I do think as a board we could address and talk about, because I know that that's certainly been at the forefront of the facility folks in our business office. There was an expansion on requests for things like music, art, theater, and foreign language at different grade levels. Then there's some specific things like driver's education capacity, textbook and books in the library, after school programs, seeking more AP advanced placement classes. There were some additional comments about facilities and prioritizing the most disadvantaged students and families in our district to make sure we're putting our resources where they're needed the most. And there was significant input on requesting that we not fund the school resource officer position, but rather redirect those funds to the social, emotional, and mental health supports for students, especially in light of the pandemic. So I don't think any of those things are surprises, but certainly there was a pretty wide variety of answers there that's in keeping with what I think we as a board have spent a lot of time talking about. But I'm wondering if any of those things prompt any of the folks on the call, if you have any additional things you want to expand on, or things you didn't hear in any of those that you think you want to make sure that we have on our radar screen. I think this is the time to bring those things up.
I have a comment. This is Cara Robichek. So Libby, I know, is already aware of this, but there is an opportunity coming up because there's going to be a new bus service in this city. It's called My Ride by GMT. It was being called microtransit, but now it's being called a flexible service, flexible schedule, or flexible. At the end of the day, I'll come up with the words later, but it is an opportunity that we could see additional busing for high school and middle school students at a very low cost. So I just want to make sure that that's being considered.
Excellent, thank you. I had not heard that.
Are there other community people who are not on the board on the call? Can we identify?
Yep, it looks like we have 5. We have Cameron, Kara, Peter, Chad, and Kelly.
I'm happy to jump in. This is Chad Simmons, community member. My daughter is a kindergartner at UES. I think I'd just like to say, first off, thank you for putting the survey out and this opportunity for community members to weigh in. I think this is great that we have multiple ways for folks to plug in. I think just in general, I want to support a lot of the things. It was actually really tough for me to prioritize those. So I think I chose a lot of 4 and 5s on that list. So I would echo a lot of what's been said in terms of the written place or written ideas in terms of mental health, social services, diversity, inclusion, equity, to continually invest in those as a school board in part of our school budget, and then encourage continual and ongoing learning in those areas, ways we can always improve. I think obviously the pandemic is giving us a big opportunity to reflect on our role in the school districts and the school board's role in social emotional well-being. So I think just looking at investing in the long term for those, including staff, would be wonderful. I don't think I have anything else to add.
Great, thank you.
I would like to speak at some point, but I'd rather to have women and other underrepresented people talk first. I don't want to have us all be white males talking.
No one else is jumping up, Peter, so I'd say jump on board.
Okay. I'd like to just make a couple of observations. This is about high school. In the early 1970s, I was a chemistry teacher in Springfield, Vermont, and we got slammed that year by drugs pouring into the area because of the Rockefeller drug laws in New York State. Just moved over into Vermont, and suddenly there were all kinds of drugs available. It was also a time when sexuality was even more at the forefront for adolescents than ever, partially because access to abortion was beginning to be legal. And the school was caught completely unprepared. And I noted with interest earlier this year, before COVID, I believe, that there was beginning to be some talk about sexuality education at the high school and maybe at the middle school as well. I can't quite recall. And in any case, I was tapped to provide both sex education and drug education courses and to be available as a counselor in both those areas. And which, believe me, I did very little chemistry teaching that year because of the incredible, not just the need, but the lack of resources that had been applied to that, partially because faculty and even guidance counselors were uncomfortable with both of these topics. And I just think that this is one of those same kind of moments. And I hope that whatever is done with respect to the resource officer, that there will be people who have counseling abilities and who are comfortable in talking to young people, with young people, either in small group settings or individually about issues of sexuality and also drug use and abuse. That's what just my input on that.
Thank you.
So we have a couple new people who have joined us. So I just wanted to reiterate to our new community members, and I see a teacher as well, has joined us around. It's just because of the small amount of people from the community on the call. It's just an open-ended, what you'd like to see the board and the administration consider as we're putting together our budget for the 2020 fiscal year. So if there are new people who've joined on, feel free to unmute yourself and jump into the conversation.
Okay. Did I mute myself? Am I muted?
I hear you, Alice.
Unmuted, Alice. Just introduce yourself before you start talking, okay?
Okay. Hi, my name is Alice, and I'm one of the school crossing guards at Union Elementary School. And I was talking to Julia, one of the parents, and she said that I should come on the meeting because I was saying to her about the budget. You know, they were talking about all the people in the school, and I said to her, what about the crossing guards for the budget? Because we're the ones that keep the children safe, that get the children safe to and from school. And I think that's a very big thing for the budget for the crossing guards, because I take very good care of all the kids that I cross.
You sure do.
Thank you,
Yes.
Alice. Yes, you do.
Thank
There's
you.
no mention. Our crossing guards are pretty safe in our budget. That's a
Yes.
needed feature in the city of Montpelier, not one that you should be worried about.
Okay. But I wanted to understand, what do they mean by the budget?
Good question. So every year, we go through all the pieces of the budget from every single line item. So Grant, the business manager, myself, and all of our principals go through every single line, single staffing line, every expense line. We look at the actuals from the year before and what we had budgeted for, where did we go over, where did we go under, and look to put numbers together to present to the board. So something like crossing guards are in our budget every single year as a line item. And really it just kind of passes on, that kind of thing passes on from one year to the next. But every year the board's responsibility is to gather community input and take the recommendations from the administration to put together a responsible budget for our community to vote on. Does that answer your question, Alice?
And another question I also had, what last year the school was paying the crossing guards and all the hourly employees because of the COVID. And I wanted to see if that still would stay the same.
That's our plan. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That was my question.
No problem, Alice. I knew that was in there somewhere.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kelly, who else is on here that I see? Kelly Murphy, or I don't want to call anybody out if they don't want to speak. That's absolutely fine. Rebecca Delorio, one of our fabulous teachers. If anybody else wants to jump in and give the board any conversational points to think about, please do so.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Delorio.
I know I could get you out.
I'm a teacher at the middle school, and I'm actually really just here representing some of our teachers union to just sort of hear what the community is hoping to share with the board so that we can sort of, have our knowledge in there as well. So that is why I'm here.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Jill, I could ask some questions too. So I'm curious, when people say diversity, equity, and inclusion, that often means different things to different people, depending on where people's, I don't know if priority is the right word, but where their vision and passion lies. So I'm curious from the group who are here, if you did indeed take that survey, or even if you didn't, help me get a sense of what that means to you, of social emotional wellness. And Chad, you spoke, I don't want to call you out, but you spoke about social and emotional wellness. You're going to have a kiddo in our school, hopefully for the next, I don't know, 12 years. And so if we were to do a top-notch job with your child, as a senior 12 years from now around social emotional wellness or diversity, equity, and inclusion, what's that image for you? And I don't mean to pick on Chad. Anybody could answer that. Even board members, you could answer that too.
If others want to jump in first, but yeah, I'm happy to answer. Hearing none. Sure, it's a great question. I think for me and for our family, I think having my kiddo be able to navigate a very different world than what we know now is going to be of the utmost importance. I want her to be able to walk in and out of any situation and feel comfortable and treat people well. And that's all order for our district, because our world's going to look a lot different in 12 years. So I would say in the social emotional realm, that's kind of what I'm looking for. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion, in terms of the role of the school board, I would want to see an investment in ongoing training, professional development for staff. Staff gets paid to do that, so it wouldn't just be on folks' own time. That would be part of our annual budget. I would want to see essentially kind of a community of learning around that, family engagement, community engagement in that process. And I think we'll be able to kind of learn what is needed as years go by. And I think as we're seeing right now, I think since June, things have changed so dramatically. And I think not just having a splash on our website or kind of a front-facing approach, but also a three-dimensional, where we're actually committed to hiring a diverse workforce, and that we're committed to that from top to bottom, right and left. So I think, I could go into a lot more greater detail, but that's kind of broadly what I would look for as a parent.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate that. Board members, that's open to you all too, as community members.
Well, just to pile on here, I think that this year's pandemic and the last 4 years of the Trump presidency have made crystal clear that there need to be discussions and a much greater understanding on the part of all Americans. And I would start with young people, because it seems like we have had a whole generation that missed the boat on some pretty important issues. We really need to take a look at the way in which we teach history. Just even the Electoral College, which is talked about as if it were just a political entity, when in fact it's deeply embedded in the history of racism in this country and slavery. We just need to have kids learn from a very early age about the realities of the founding of this country, taking away land from Native Americans, building an economy on the backs of African slaves, disenfranchising people who didn't have, or never enfranchising people who didn't own property until it was forced upon them. but having a country which was basically designed for the wealthy to succeed and for the working class to be their, if not their slaves, then their poorly paid servants. These kinds of things have been mistaught in American schools for a long time. There was a break when I broke into teaching in the mid '60s. There was a moment in time for about during the Vietnam War when we did take seriously reteaching the truth, and Howard Zinn and others, helped us to learn things that we were never taught as teachers. Even as a chemistry teacher, I taught about the relationship between science and warfare, and DNA was just beginning to be used, and we brought in people who were doing that research, and my students grilled them on what would happen if DNA was misused the way nuclear power was. And I think we've got to get back to that kind of dealing with really tough issues, and not in a politically correct way, but in a factual way. We've got to look at the facts of our history and be able to discuss them. And if people have political differences and disbelieve some of those things, send them to do the research, find out what the Electoral College really has done over the history of this country. So I would like to see a reconsideration. It's not just having an ethnic studies curriculum, which I think we should have, but going back into what we do teach, whether it's chemistry or math or social studies or English. Why have we been teaching this canon of white male authors all these years? Now, I know we have a broader range of books that are being taught now, but let's look at why we were taught all those white male authors all this time. Why is it that people don't know about women authors, from throughout history, important women authors? Thanks.
Well said. Thank you.
I'll answer your question, Libby. Thanks for asking it. I think it's a really good way to approach these topics. And for me, they kind of go hand in hand, social emotional learning and diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I think when they are combined well, we have kids who, when graduating and leaving our community or staying in our community, are justice oriented, meaning that they understand, and I think particularly about my own kids who are white, they understand that they hold a lot of privilege, and they have an understanding of how to use it and how also to make space for other people. And I think that it requires a very dedicated social emotional learning in order for them to be able to do that, and lenses of diversity and equity and inclusion in their learning, in order to be able to have the facts, as Peter was just saying, that give them a knowledge base, that give them confidence, and then that combined with strong social emotional learning, make them see that other people are just as worthy as they are, and that they should be taking steps to decenter themselves and make space for others.
Hi, Libby. I'll weigh in. So very much support what everyone else said. And I guess I work in technology. And I think the other part of that we don't often discuss or see is there are people, AI is coming, automation is coming. There's no way to stop it. And we need good people who know science, good people who are coding those things, good people who are involved in those discussions. Because if you don't have the people who do have a sense of justice in these areas, in these fields, you know, you will not have any input into what is certainly going to be part of our future. So that is, I really would like to see some more effort or
Did we lose you, Jer?
I think Jerry.
I think we froze. I think she froze.
Shoot.
She looks very thoughtful and pensive, though, in her frozen mind. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I cut out there for a minute, but
but you look very thoughtful when you did, Jerry.
Yeah, so just something to keep in mind. I mean, Vermont overall, sometimes, you know, we're very rural and we can get a little disconnected from these things. And so if we could keep this, maybe the students are very much involved in that, but it's something they should be thinking about for their own futures.
Anyone else want to add anything into anything, considering budget and priorities? If not, we can give the board members a chance to run to the facilities. And
I had a question I wanted to ask you.
Oh, go ahead, Alice.
Okay. I'm a school crossing guard, and I wanted to know, is that because we're not unionized, the school crossing guards, how can that happen?
How can unionization happen?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know.
We don't get no health benefits or nothing. And we're out there.
I don't know the answer about crossing guards and how you start a union. Grant might know that.
Or how can we go about getting some, like, we can't in this state, because I was a school crossing guard in New York City, in the Bronx. We were able to collect unemployment. In this state, we can't collect unemployment, and we're off for the summer. We don't even get paid. We don't get paid for the summer.
Right.
And I thought maybe that's a good question to bring up.
Yeah, I think that's one that you and I can have a conversation with if we set up a time to talk, and we can talk with Mark and the other crossing guards as well.
Yes.
In Montpelier. And I can see if I can find out some information for you around unionization and that kind of thing.
At least because I feel we're out in the street, we're taking our lives in our hand. We should get some kind of benefits.
Yeah, that's determined by the amount of hours worked under what we have to go by. So we can talk about that so we can make sure that you're clear about what that is all responsible for.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And what's your name?
I'm Libby. I'm the superintendent.
Libby.
I'm technically your boss, but that's okay.
Oh, I didn't even know. This is the first time I'm ever meeting you.
I think we've met once or twice before.
I don't remember ever seeing you.
That's okay. All right. So board members, would you like to go use the facilities? I'd like to thank the community members. Jill, since you took charge, Jerry started us off. You went in the middle. So you want to finish us up here with closing this part of the meeting and then coming back at 6:30?
Sure. I guess, do we need a motion to adjourn?
It was a warned meeting, so probably.
Okay. I'll move that we adjourn the budget forum and thank everyone very much for coming. And as Libby pointed out, there will be more sort of public feedback and opportunities for us to inform the community on where we end up, knowing that we're all, in the midst of a strange time, if ever. But thank you very much for joining us this evening. And there is a regular school board meeting starting at 6:30 for folks who are interested. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. All those board members in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Okay. All right. I didn't do roll call, but it seems like we're okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, very much. It looks like Orca was here
Thank
and
you.
Alcor was here, so this will get some attention. Thank you, folks, for coming too.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Anna, is there a different link for the board meeting, or do we just kind of have to shut off our cameras?
It's the same link. Yep. So
Okay. So we can
turn
just
off your cameras. You can get out and rejoin if you'd like, but I think we should keep it going until.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just shut off.
Do
my
we
camera.
need to shut the chat off? Because the chat is working. I mean, it was fine. It was innocuous, but I know that for board meetings, it's usually off.
Yep, I just turned it off.
Okay. Chat disabled. Okay.
All right. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks, Libby.
Thank-
See you soon.
Should I close that down? Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I thought I closed it.
Hey Anna, how are you doing? Hey Jill.
Hi, Aniket. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good.
Sorry, I had to step away. I joined and I had to step away, so I couldn't attend the town hall.
Well, we finished early too. We only went till a little after 6.
Thanks for making that chart very helpful, Etiquette.
Oh, no problem.
Etiquette's showing his wonky side. Watch out, he's trying to compete with Andrew.
I actually got a reply from Andrew. He said, "Can you put it in in an order, descending order?" So I replied to him. I forgot to copy everybody on that.
Jerry, I love the office here. Like the bookshelf that you're behind you. That's pretty cool.
The drawers?
That's a good use of space right there on a place that could be an awkward space.
Yeah, either a built-in or that. And I measured and said, okay, this is going to be easier than a built-in.
Yeah, that's neat.
So.
Are we missing anyone?
Emma.
Emma, yeah.
Dina, Anna's already answered me. It's on the school board budget page on the website.
Thank you, Anna. I will look.
Well, let's get started. I'm assuming Emma's going to join. I have not heard otherwise. Opening the November 18th, 2020 Montpelier-Roxbury Board of School Directors meeting at 6:34. Let's just do roll. Aniket?
Aye. Here.
Ryan?
Aye.
I think you can say here, since we're not voting, but I think does it. Jill?
Here.
Jerry?
Here.
Nia is your first one.
Present.
Andrew?
Here.
And Mara?
Here.
So before I go to public comment, I just want to announce that unfortunately Mara has decided to step down to attend to some personal matters. So we're all very, very sad about that. She's been an excellent board member and has really helped us guide through some complex issues, particularly around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we certainly hope that we can draw on your resources in the future, Mara, and your expertise in that area, but definitely understand your decision. But that also means that we will again be seeking another board member. So I know we had a robust pool last time, so it'd be great if those who were interested previously would be continued to be interested, because we had 3 fantastic candidates, but also anyone else. And we'll be sending out something more formally, but probably in the next 2 to 3 board meetings, we'll hopefully be making an appointment to that position. But thanks again to Mara and for all the great service she's given the board over the last several months.
So Jim, what does that mean for the SRO committee?
We're probably gonna have to appoint another board member to the SRO committee.
Okay.
And we can do that tonight, or we can wait a little, give it a little time and see if anyone else wants to step up. But I suggest we do that tonight, because that committee is moving quickly. So maybe we can add that to the agenda. That would seem to go with the appointment of the vice chair. And then also Mia has expressed interest in serving on the superintendent evaluation committee. Although maybe with that in mind, she might want to do SRO in the interim, because I think that's going to be, if she's interested, that is going to be a time commitment as well. But we can get to that later, and maybe give Mia some time to think about it, since this is new information. All right. With those 2 announcements, let's move to public comments. If anybody has public comment, please raise your hand using the raise hand function, which is if you hit the participants link at the bottom of your screen, a little pop-up will come up, and there's a raise hand button at the bottom of that pop-up. If you have any difficulty figuring that out, feel free to just make yourself visible and physically raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we can move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? And I think Mia noticed some typos, so we might want to pull those out and correct them. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Do we need Ryan, do we need to do anything special if we're going to be correcting typos in terms of that motion?
Yeah, and I think we have warrants to add into that came across today or yesterday also, right? So
yeah, there was a warrant that came across and a couple more appointments.
Yeah, so just so that the motion is clear, we should make the additions and the whatever we're pulling out for discussion. So I guess, see, Mara, your last meeting, do you want the honors?
I move that we accept the consent agenda with corrections as noted.
Yeah, and additions as noted.
Yes.
Second.
All those, well, I guess we have to do the roll call again. Etiquette.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Mia.
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Mara.
Aye.
Great, consent agenda passes. Move to the board discussion, and Brian Murphy, I think, yeah, I see you, is here to talk about the naming of the baseball field. So, Brian?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Brian Murphy. I'm also here with my son, Aiden Murphy. And also, you'll see Oliver Plavin is on screen, as well as Nicholas Bevan. They're also teammates of Peyton Smith. I sent an email earlier about this, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to put us on the agenda and listen to us tonight. The idea that we have, well, just reminding everybody, unfortunately, sadly, Peyton Smith, who was a student at Montpelier High School and graduated from the school last spring, passed away from bone cancer in October. And it was a long time that he spent battling bone cancer. And during that time, he was going back and forth to Boston a lot for those treatments. They're difficult treatments that he was going through. But one of the respites that he had from that difficult journey was playing baseball. And some of the best memories were being able to be out on the baseball field with the guys, be able to make friends and just have fun and kind of forget about what he was going through, and enjoy just being a teenager and having fun with his friends. So our thought, and this thought that Aiden came up with and some others just talking about it, is that since there's no name for the baseball field at Montpelier High School, and just to be clear, we're talking about the baseball field at the high school, not the Mountaineers field over at the recreation center or anything like that, just the one that's right behind the school, to have that field named after Peyton, to call it Peyton Smith Field. The idea is that we would go ahead and have a plaque, we'd raise some money, get a plaque to put together, attach it to the backstop there, maybe have a little celebration at home opener in May or so, and the first game, and just kind of a way they can always be remembered there for his family and his friends and everything. So that's the idea. And, I don't want this all to become from me. It's really come from the students. So I want to invite Aiden, Nicholas, and Oliver just to speak about, their thoughts of Peyton and what this might mean.
When Peyton first moved here, his family had just come from the Netherlands, being a military family, and they had just found out that he had bone cancer, and he showed up a few days late to school, and the one thing that really made him excited was hanging out with the baseball team and getting to be out on that field back there. And I think that having the fact that there's no name for the field right now, and we have the chance to name it, it'd be great to be in Peyton's name.
Oliver, Nicholas?
Yeah, so I'm Nicholas. I was also a captain on the baseball team with Aiden, and I was lucky enough to get to know Peyton pretty well, whether it was just on the baseball team or in school and classes. I had almost all my classes with him, and he really inspired me as a person more than anyone I know. And I'm sure you could ask anyone who was on the team with us or just anybody around school, they'd say the exact same thing. But he really just he did more than inspire me to be a better person. He really just changed my life. And as soon as I heard this idea of naming the field after him, I thought that was amazing, and I thought that'd be a great way to honor him.
Hi. So like me, Payne did not grow up in Montpelier, but he fit in and he was part of this community from basically day one. I think he belonged everywhere, and this is clear from his dedication to the team. His perseverance through, battling cancer, and by the ease of him being able to make friends was really inspiring. And I think naming the field after Payne would be a great way to commemorate his life and what he stood for.
So I'm not sure what the process is and how the vote would go and everything, but that's our request, is if we could go ahead and have that occur.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, Aiden, Oliver, and Nicholas. I think it's a fantastic idea and a great way to pay tribute to Peyton and his sadly cut short life and the contribution he made to the community and to all the people he touched. So I'm certainly supportive. Libby, I think we just need a motion.
Jim, can I make a suggestion to the board? Yeah. To either discuss and yay or nay? We have a very healthy fund balance, and there's no reason to raise money for this. We can make a beautiful sign for Peyton out of that money, and we can get the guys to help us design that.
That'd be awesome.
So it matches what Peyton would want. So I would recommend to the board that we use our fund balance to get a pretty killer sign going on our baseball field. Need some touch-ups anyway.
Yeah, that was my next question, was whether this was something we could fund without. So I would love to entertain a motion to both name the field after Peyton Smith and to set aside some funds to put a plaque up or another put a plaque and other commemorations to acknowledge the naming.
I move that we commemorate Peyton Smith's life by naming the field and having a relevant and delightful dedication.
And can we just add to that, Mara, that we're going to pay for the plaque out of fund balance?
Out of the fund balance, yeah.
Second it.
Any discussion?
I think it's a great idea. Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking the lead on this and paying respect to a life that seems like touched many. So sorry for your loss.
Thank you for being supportive of it.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well to Aiden and Nicholas and Oliver. It's really great that you guys are here. That you want to honor your friend this way. I'm really impressed with all of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right.
Aniket,
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Mia?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Mara?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you so much. This is a really, really touching thing that you've all done, and we're glad we could help in this way, and hope that this helps his memory live on and helps you remember and celebrate his life.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll share the news with the family, and Libby will be in touch, as winter goes on, to put the plaque together.
Yeah, Renee
Awesome.
and Matt will be on it. I bet Matt McLean will be on it too. So Renee and Matt will be on it in order to get in touch with these guys to make sure that the whatever sign we create matches what you guys want.
That'd be awesome. And one other little nice note about it is that Peyton's younger brother Keegan is a freshman at school and will be playing baseball this year, so he'll get to be playing on his older brother's field. All right. Thank you very much. everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh, um, yeah, it's touching when we get to do things like that, which is, or yeah, glad Brian organized that. That was wonderful. With Bridget's departure, not only did we lose a fantastic board member, we also lost our vice chair. So we do need to appoint a new vice chair. And then there are a couple committee appointments that we talked about that we needed to finalize that have totally escaped my brain. Appointing someone to the SRO committee and then a possible appointment for Mia, which may be one and the same, unless we want to punt on that. On the vice chair, Andrew has expressed interest and willingness to step into that role. I think he would be a fantastic choice if the rest of the board is supportive, but I also, you know, if someone else is interested, don't want to foreclose that opportunity either, but if we're willing to take Andrew up on his offer, I think it would be great to have him serve as vice chair. And shockingly, he is now one of the more senior members of the board. So I will, if someone else is interested, now is the time to express it. Otherwise, it would be great to entertain a motion to appoint Andrew as vice chair for the remainder of the year, which would be till town meeting day.
I move we appoint Andrew Stein as the vice chair of the Montpelier-Roxbury School Board of Directors.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
I have a new board member question.
Yes.
What does the vice chair do?
The vice chair basically serves as the chair when the chair is stuck under a rock or something. So that's I think the primary thing. But he can also sign, for instance, yeah, every couple of weeks we have to do a warrant for the payroll. So the vice chair can also sign the warrant if the chair is unavailable. Basically, it's someone who can do chair functions when the chair is unavailable. Both, you know, shepherd meetings, and then you know, there are things like contracts and whatnot that the chair needs to sign and the vice chair can sign in the chair's absence.
Andrew would be Kamala Harris.
Yes.
I love it. What a compliment.
Aniket?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Mia?
Aye.
Tina?
She's not on the board, Jim.
I knew that would happen at least once.
I did hear that there was an opening after tonight, though. I don't know. I want to put that out there. I did hear that.
Andrew?
I was waiting for Jim to say the vice chair does whatever the chair wants him to do.
Well, I'm going to tell Andrew after the vote. Yes. Mara?
Aye.
And Andrew, did I give you a chance to vote on yourself?
Yeah, aye. I'm happy to do it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Thank
you. And thank you for stepping up. Are we ready to? Is anyone super interested in serving on the SRO committee?
to be frank, I'm very interested, but I've learned from past experience that volunteering for more than 2 committees, especially when one of them is the negotiations committee and you're in the heat of things, is not a good recipe for work-life balance. So.
And now you're a vice chair?
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that interested, yes, but I'm not going to put my name forward.
Not to put you on the spot, Mia, but are you already appointed to other committees? I know sometimes that happens outside of the meetings, but I do think it would be great to have you on there if possible. But.
And we could make that your only committee until that committee wraps up, which I think is going to go at least till March. So if you're interested, I think you'd be fantastic as well.
Before we get too crazy, we've lost half of the policy committee with Mara's departure. Yeah, so we're down to, we had been a 4, and now we're down to a 2-person committee. It'll just be Emma and I. So we don't have to choose right now, but it would be nice to have at least one other body. I'm helping out with some of the policy work going forward.
I mean, I'd be happy to go back on policy. I know I was on it for a little while and wasn't particularly helpful, but maybe over time I can be more useful. Other than that, I to Andrew's point, I'm on the negotiation committee and I don't want to overcommit, which is why I wouldn't necessarily want to step up to the SRO community forum, but I would be happy to serve on the policy committee if that's helpful.
And one quick question. This is a little bit of a digression, but it feeds into this, Jim, while we're talking about this, because some of these decisions are based on the fact that our highly valued board director, Mara, is leaving, which I'm very sad about, going back to that. But since we just had a bunch of really qualified candidates come forward, could we do an expedited round of this? Like say, hey, if you're interested, reach out in the next 10 days, and we could appoint somebody at our next board meeting. We could reach out to the 3 people that had just expressed interest. And
I'm in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
And I know you and feel free to reach out as well, but hopefully we can get, it'd be great if we get all 3 of those to throw their hats back into the ring.
Because what I'm thinking, Ryan, to your point, is if Mia, for example, joined the SRO committee, which has more frequent work right now and a lot of time sensitive work, we might be able to then appoint somebody to the policy committee at our next meeting, or have an idea as to who that person would be.
No, and I think that's totally relevant. I think you're going to have a hard time twisting elbows with the group that's in the meeting right now to get more committed between negotiations and prior committee appointments. So yeah, we'll make that known in the announcement that goes out for Mara's replacement, that committee seats will be expected to be filled with your presence.
We
you're right. The SRO committee is rolling, and we need to get somebody into that. And
yeah, I would agree. The superintendent evaluation committee, I think we're going to talk about that next time. I actually have to drop because I have a meeting, but I'm in with, I sent Jim the documentation for this round, and hopefully, I'm fine to do that as much until we get somebody.
Yeah, and I think we're planning to talk about that next meeting or the meeting.
Next meeting, yeah. So I'm going to drop, so see you, everyone.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks.
So if people want to think about the SRO committee, why don't I propose this? We give people some time, and I think waiting until the next meeting, there's probably going to be some movement on the SRO committee, but I think someone could step up and attend the meetings, and then we could appoint them formally afterwards because they're open meetings. And I think someone could, sit through one not formally appointed, 1 or 2.
Jim, or we could appoint Mia right now if she's interested to the SRO.
If Mia's interested, I definitely would be interested in appointing her, but I don't want to. I also want to give her some time to think about it if she wants time to think about it.
Mia, what do you think?
Mara, is your resignation effective immediately, or are you sticking around sort of like Bridget did for a few more?
I'm planning to attend the meeting, the safety committee meeting tomorrow, and then after that it'll be effective immediately.
Okay.
And I totally think that you should take that position, and I'm definitely not, strong arming you at all, with love.
That's very kind. Thank you. I'll do it. Sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think we need a motion to appoint Mia to the SRO committee.
I move to appoint Mia to the SRO committee when Mara has finished her term tomorrow, so that we don't have more board members on the committee at once than we had initially said we would. Does that make sense?
Yes.
With that qualification?
Yeah, why don't we just make the appointment effective November 20th?
Perfect. Yeah, so I move to appoint Mia to the SRO committee effective November 20th.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Aniket?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Mia?
I didn't think I get to vote on myself.
You
Aye.
do. Andrew?
Aye.
And Mara?
Aye.
Great, thank you, Mia, and thank you, Andrew. And Jill, on the policy committee, do you want to step up on that, or do you want to wait and see? Because I don't think there's a ton of
I can
urgency.
wait. I can wait until we have another person on board. That's fine, and just know I can be Plan B.
Okay, perfect. Let's do that unless you are like, I want to serve on the policy committee, please. Then we can wait on that. And do we want to set a date for when we want to make a decision on the board member? Our next meeting is the 2nd, right, Libby?
I think we should aim for the 2nd. If those 3 candidates are interested and we put it out and we get another candidate or two, great. Or even if we get 1 or 2 of those candidates, great.
Let's do that. Let's put it on the 2nd, and if we don't have much of a candidate pool on the 2nd, we can always extend it. Okay. Great, and maybe I can work with Anna and Libby to put out another announcement.
We got that. Anna's already doing it right now. I can guarantee you.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna. And then budget priorities from community input. First off, Jill, thank you so much for stepping up and shepherding that meeting. Andrew and I were both stuck under rocks at that point, but no, I got pulled into some work calls. So I just want to give a quick summary of what we heard, and I know that there's a survey and some documents were circulated, but I don't know, Jill, do you want to just give a quick 2-minute overview of the feedback?
Sure. So the survey had a pretty good response rate, and that was really helpful. And I know Kit put it into a visual, which was really helpful, which a few of us got this afternoon. It looked like before the meeting, with sort of the big high-level priorities, about like special education, early childhood, after school, social emotional learning. There were several sort of categories, and folks were asked to rank that. And then there was a place where people could add either things that they felt hadn't been addressed or things they wanted to emphasize. And so that included everything from requesting we consider the budgetary impact of pandemic response, things like ventilation, things like that. After school programming, music, art, theater, and foreign language. After school had plenty of comments. There were also some sort of resource specific things like AP classes, library books and textbooks, facilities, and there were definitely certainly comments about diversity, equity, inclusion, and not supporting the school resource officer position. But there was pretty widespread theme of emphasizing social, emotional, and mental health for students and families, and prioritizing our budget to the most disadvantaged students and families. And then we had a really good conversation. There were just a handful of folks that were on the call, but they had really great comments. We had someone who offered up that there was a new bus service coming to Montpelier that might be a good resource for middle and high school students. There was a gentleman who sort of drew the parallel to what he went through as an educator, back in the 70s and 80s, about sort of schools were kind of caught on their heels and weren't prepared to address some of the sort of changing cultural tidal waves that were coming regarding sexuality and drugs and alcohol, and that this was sort of our opportunity to be a little bit more prepared and proactive in supporting students and really investing in counselors and guidance for students, and training and investing in staff training for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then a lot of conversation too about, history and how the lens through which we're teaching a lot of these courses has changed, and sort of the career pathways that are open to students has also changed. Jerry's not on anymore, but she had a really great point about, the changing technology, and that we're going to need students with a balance of science and ethics to sort of shepherd that to the future. So it was really an interesting conversation, and I do think it was supportive of a lot of the things that we had been talking about. I think it was helpful. It was great that we had a good feedback to the survey, because there were, I think, maybe 4 or 5 community members on the call, so we did wrap that up a little early. But I found it really helpful and engaging. It was a really great group that was on. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or things that I didn't address.
Yeah, questions for Jill? I know there are a few other people on. Any other observations?
I just wanted to say first to you, Jill, thank you for being so prepared for that town hall. You presented to the town hall, essentially, for those board members who weren't there, presented to the town hall essentially what she just told us. And I just thought that was a really great way to set a good grounding for the conversation. So thank you for doing that. And just one other one that I had notes on was we heard from the crossing guard as well, with, I guess, well, advocating for making sure crossing guards were included in the budget, which we know they will definitely be as a safety feature, and then also had just a few questions about how salary and benefits work. So Libby committed to taking that offline and connecting with the crossing guards on that. So thanks for doing that, Libby.
Great. Any other comments on that? Otherwise, we can give Susan the floor. The board communications training, which has been great in the past, and with so many new board members, I think will be super valuable. So Susan, why don't I hand it over to you? And I don't know if you want to share a screen, but Libby, is she set up to do that if she needs to?
Can make it work, Susan. If you need anything and we can't get it to work, then
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I've gotten very flexible about Zoom meetings. You do what works. So I recognize a few of you from a couple of years ago when I came and met with your board, and then I don't recognize some of you. So let me introduce myself. I'm Susan Holson from VSBA. That's Vermont School Boards Association, which is actually just around the corner from the high school. Although I have been working from home since March, so I haven't been in Montpelier. my role at VSBA is the Director of Education Services, which pretty much means I do most of the professional development work for school board members. And that is one of the core principal pieces of our mission at the School Boards Association, of which you are members. And so all of the resources that we have are available to all of you as members. And before I get into anything, I would just like to say, every time I've come to one of your meetings, I have been blown away by your student representatives who serve on your board. And I don't get to see them tonight, but boy, that presentation from those kids really tugged at my heart. You've got an amazing group of students, and you're smart and fortunate to have them come to your meetings so you can remember what it is you're doing all this work for. Now, having said that, Libby had gotten in touch with me and asked me to sort of go through communication protocols for board members, because when you're wearing multiple hats, things sometimes get really confusing. And it's sometimes hard to remember which hat you've got on when and what the ramifications are. So I've really geared this mostly towards your newer board members, because she did also let me know that you're in transition, and it sounds like that's continuing, and you do have a lot of new members. So I welcome those of you who have been around for a while to chime in if you've got any thoughts or suggestions. And at the same time, I want to say, once I share my screen, this is, I think, the biggest failure of Zoom. Once I share my screen, I can no longer see who's here, or I can't see your hands raised or anything else. So don't worry about interrupting me. Please feel free to do that. Chime in with questions or comments, or just tell me to slow down. I've got about 40 minutes, I think, and I'm going to race through this, but I want to make sure that it penetrates. So if I'm going too fast, we won't go through it all, and we'll just take our time and make sure that it all makes sense to you. That works for everyone? Okay, good. So I will host disabled participant screen sharing. Will somebody give me permission? I don't know who the meeting host is. Is it you, Libby?
All right, try again.
Oh, that works. Thank you.
There you go.
Excellent. All right, so are you seeing the presenter view, or are you seeing the whole thing?
We've got
the presenter view.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the presenter view.
All right,
it's
well,
fine with me. But...
yeah, we'll go back. Okay, so really the question that I think the core question here is, what do I say, and when do I say it, and to whom do I say it, and more importantly, maybe, when don't I say anything? So that's sort of the premise that I'm starting with, and we're going to sort of walk through some different scenarios to figure out how to get there. And this is really one lens that is looking at the school board role, what you are as a board and what you are as a board member to your community. So we're sort of coming in the back door here, talking about roles and responsibilities through the lens of specifically communication. But remember, that's part of a much bigger picture. And everything we're going to talk about tonight is really based on the proprietary platform that the Vermont School Boards Association has developed over years of what the essential work of Vermont school boards is. And for those of you who are new members, if this book on the right-hand side of the screen doesn't look familiar, I have a case of them in my trunk. We have cartons of them at the office. And I strongly encourage anyone who doesn't have one, you should get one. They're $15. We charge it to the SU. Libby can put in an order, or any of you can just let us know, send me an email or whatever. It runs through all of the best practices and give some rationale behind them. And so it's a handy resource. You know, I'm not going to say you're going to read it cover to cover, but if it's on the shelf and you have some questions and you can just pull on it, that's helpful. And the piece on the left of the screen is our online adaptation of that. We have a toolkit on the Vermont School Boards Association website, and it's all linked to resources. So that's just sort of an aside, but that's the lens that I'm coming at this with. So there's lots of different types of communication, and they obviously just keep exploding. And I didn't even list them all here. I mean, I've left out texting, and I've left out social media that I don't even understand, and I'm sure a lot of other things. But as we know, there's lots of different ways to communicate. And the one thing that I think is really important to remember for all communication, especially as you're sitting in your school board seat, is that communication is two-way. It's not a one-way deal, right? I mean, I like this, that's the co of communication, even though I know that's not the origin of the word. And if you're a Greek scholar, you'll probably get upset with me for doing that. But no matter what form it takes, you got to be listening, and you are contributing also. And so regardless of how you're communicating, what you're saying and how you're presenting the board in what you're saying are important. And that's where it sometimes gets murky, because your personal opinions on things and the board's opinions on things may not be the same. And while you are on the board and people are approaching you because you're on the board and they know you're a board member, they're talking to you as a board member, and you need to remember that. So, you know, the first thing we think of with communication with the community is people aren't happy, and that's when they get in touch. And there's a lot of truth to that, right? So if somebody's going to communicate with you, send you an email, stop you on the street, text you, whatever it may be, you're going to take a complaint from somebody in the community about the schools. You're going to hear that. What are you going to do with that? Well, you actually have a policy in your policy manual, expectations for board members. And in that policy, it outlines your chain of command for this exact situation, which is that you are going to tell the board chair, you're going to let Jim know, and you're going to let Libby know that you have received a complaint. Or maybe you're going to let Jim know and he'll take it up with Libby. I'm not sure how your board works on that particular thing. Either one of those is sort of left to the way an individual board structures itself. You're not going to respond to that complaint, because as soon as you do, the person on the other side of that is hearing, oh, well, the school board told me, blah, 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 blah. And that's not true, right? You're not speaking for the board in that situation. So you have to be really, really careful. Sometimes it's okay to follow up later if this is a personal connection of yours. You know, just did everything work out? You know, did you get the answers you needed? Did you get that taken care of? And sometimes it's not appropriate to follow up because it's a more contentious thing, or it's a deeper dive, or it's going to end up in some sort of union grievance or God knows what. And so you just want to stay back. And the main reason for all of this is because if in the event there's an appeal of some kind, some policy related matter didn't go according to policy and procedures, there's a reason for it, somebody's appealing about it. Once they go to the teacher, to the building administrators, come to the central office and deal with Libby. If a parent still isn't satisfied, you as the school board are their last line of defense. They will issue a formal complaint to you, and you will sit as a quasi-judicial body to hear all of the evidence, just like you're a judge. Collectively, you're a judge. And if you are too involved up until that point, you can't really be impartial. And that means you really have to recuse yourself. So get out of the way, stay out of the way. And then if you need to be pulled in, you can be pulled in effectively. Make sense? All right. So this is part of your policy on handling complaints. Complaints or criticisms received by individual board members go to the board chair. And then you're going to direct somebody to follow the policy, and you'll let the superintendent, or this says, okay, the chair will let the superintendent know about a complaint. So let's think about it this way. Here's a little case study, okay? You run into one of your neighbors while you're shopping, and she approaches you and she just goes off about online learning, how ineffective it is. Her son is not learning anything. His teacher doesn't know what she's doing with online learning. How can this be happening? How are we going to do this? She's not engaged. The teacher's not engaged. And I want the board to do something about this. What do you say? That's a real question. What do you say?
Thank you.
Okay.
That we hear her and ask if she's spoken with her student's teacher or principal.
Great. Mm-hmm. And you might want to soften it a little bit with, this is a really tough time and everybody is learning to manage as we go. What is it that the expression they're using in the governor's office? We're building the airplane while we're flying it, and for some teachers, that's what the online learning really, that's how it hit them initially anyway. But you stay detached and you reference them back to that chain of command. That's really the important thing. And if this is somebody that, how do you leave it with her? I'll check with you next week to make sure everything, you're getting some satisfaction. That sort of implies that you're going to take some action. So this might be a time for some education. The board just doesn't handle these kinds of matters. This is not board business. This is really for the superintendent or the building principal. So those are the channels that you really need to pursue. This is not something the board can take hold of. But then you need to make sure that you let Jim know that this happened, right? And give him the details. Similarly, if it comes in by email, forward the email to him. Jim, I just received this. And the same kind of simple response back, have you talked to the teacher or to the building administrator? If it's a complaint about a classroom teacher, they may not feel comfortable talking directly to the teacher about it, but have you talked to the principal? The same kind of things. Why? First of all, you're following your existing policies. The board creates policies and then you live by them. And the entire district lives by your policies. So you want to make sure that you're following them, right? That's the starting point. And to Jill's point, and whoever it was, I didn't see who spoke first when you said you thanked them. You do want to acknowledge that you're hearing what they're saying. You're not just dismissing them out of hand, but you are kind of delaying to let them know this isn't your work here. So one of the fundamental principles that I think board members really struggle with a lot is this whole idea that you speak with one voice. People struggle with this because there are 7 of you. Did I get that right? How many board members? When you're full complement? 7, 8, something like that. And yeah, Libby? 9. I was close. So it's hard for 9 people to have one voice, right? But as an elected body, that's exactly the structure. You have as a body, you are an entity. But as a board member, in the eyes of the law, you're nothing. You're just another citizen. And so there, as I said earlier, you really do run that risk of, well, the board said, even if you're not feeling like you're representing the board at that moment. So that one voice principle is something that board members struggle with because they think that their First Amendment rights are being curtailed. Well, I'm still a citizen. I can still speak my voice. Well, you can, but it's really, really hard to take off your board hat when you're public facing. If they're coming to you as a board member, they know you're a board member and they think you're speaking for the board. No matter how many times you try and clear that up, that's what people are going to hear. So that's a really important thing. And when I say people, I mean anybody. I mean parents. I mean teachers. If you go in for your parent teacher, or if you have a conference with your kid's teacher, because it's parent teacher conference time, or because there's an issue, you know, you've got to really remind them and remind yourself, I'm here as a parent today. Let's talk about Jane, and only about Jane. And, you know, you don't have to say this, but we're not going to talk about your contract negotiations, and we're not going to talk about your health insurance, and we're going to talk about Jane, my kid. I'm here as her parent, right? And so that's really the only time I think that you can completely take off your board hat. And when you do that, I recommend that you are very, very clear about it. You know, hit it over the head. So the school boards are created by the state, right? We're granted power based on the Vermont statutes. And as I said, you have no individual power or authority in statute. So you're not above the law. Nobody is above the law, right? And again, going back to your policy, your expectation policy, board members do not speak for the board, but speak as individuals when interacting with other non-board entities or to the public. That's fine. It's important for you to understand that, but I think it's at least as important for you to understand that most people don't realize that. And so best practice is to have somebody, and your policy, it's the board chair becomes the board spokesperson. So if somebody, which is why you're going to refer all of any correspondence that you get to the chair, because Jim is your spokesperson. He's the one who's going to put the message out there that is the board's point of view. And that by having only one person do it, it's consistent, right? And he is speaking based on what he has observed and processed as being the will of the board. Got that, Jim? All right, so here's another little case study, and based on the conversation I just heard, maybe I'm not that far off the mark with this one. So you show up at your board meeting, you're going to vote on the proposed budget. You're looking at a 2.5% budget for next year, and it looks pretty good. And you go into the meeting planning to vote for it. But Libby shows up and she says, you know what? This COVID thing is out of control all over the state. I think we better plan for the possibility that we're going to be all remote. Now you think about that and you say, well, that sounds important. But what does that mean? Well, it means a big investment in technology to make sure everybody and every piece of equipment is up to speed to catch all of the nuances of the online learning. And that's going to mean more money. It's going to raise your budget by about a full point. So you're now looking at a 3.5%. And you think, that's not going to fly. People aren't going to support that. It's too big an increase in this economic climate. We're never going to be able to sell that. And so you vote against it. But at the end of the day, I guess I did know you had 9 people because I came up with at the end of the day, the vote of the board is 6-3 in favor of this amended budget. So one of your neighbors is sitting there at the meeting, and as you're walking out at the end of the meeting, he comes over and he says, so you didn't support the budget. I'm kind of confused. Should I vote for this? And then the next morning you get a call from the Times-Argus they also know that you did not support the budget, but they want to hear your feelings about it. So what do you say to your neighbor? Okay, as an individual, you did not support the budget, but it passed. What do you say?
The board has approved a budget that we think will do, should we say, quality educational opportunities for our children, and that is the budget we're going to present to our communities to support. So it wasn't a unanimous vote, but overall the board as a whole had decided that the budget was appropriate for our communities and for our students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another, my general thought on this, Susan, this is Andrew speaking,
Thank
is
you.
that people don't give up their First Amendment rights when they're board members, and so they can. I think this is best practice, and what Ryan's saying is generally best practice. But I think another approach, depending on how one feels, is somebody could say, while I did not vote for the budget because of X, Y, and Z, and that was based on my personal beliefs and opinions of the situation, I support the board as a whole. The board has the ultimate authority, and the board at large voted to approve this budget and present it to voters. And so as a member of the board, I'm supportive of where we are on this.
Yep, that works too. And if it really is the way I laid it out, you could even say, yeah, I voted against it because I'm concerned about the community's ability to support an expanded budget. There's nothing in that budget that I think is inappropriate for our kids, right? So you can clarify a little bit of your actions and then go on to what Ryan was saying. And this is the board's will, and I support it. I support this is what the board is bringing forward. What about the media? What do you do when the newspaper calls?
I would direct them to Jim.
Yay, good answer. I like that one. Right, and they're probably calling you because they think they're going to be able to churn up some dirt, right? Ooh, yes. You know, it wasn't a unanimous vote. Here's an opportunity. Let's get some headlines. Let's sell some papers here, right? Let's get that strife going. People love that stuff. Don't play. You know, nobody can have a fight with themselves, right? So if you don't play, they can't fight. So yeah. So the takeaways from this are majority rules. That's the board's action. And outside of the board meeting, you got to be really clear again. You're speaking for yourself, but the board supports this budget, to Andrew's point. So to the neighbor, I didn't vote in support of it in the meeting, and you can offer an explanation or not. But I do support the budget because this is how the majority voted. And this is, the board chose to move this way. And exactly as Emma said to the media, our chair, Jim Murphy's our spokesperson. Here's how to reach him. He represents the board's point of view. Done. So unless you're the chair, you don't want to see your name in print. Right? Especially if they're attributing a quote. So some of this gets even murkier when we throw the overlay of open meeting law onto board business. And for those of you who are newer board members, if you haven't been involved in other public bodies, open meeting law went into effect. I'm going to say it was like maybe 10 years ago that it really got stringent, 8-10 years, something like that. And it's the underlying premise is you are elected to conduct the people's business and you're accountable to them, and therefore you need to be transparent. And that's why your agendas and your warnings all need to be at least 5 days before your meeting, and they have to be posted in public places. There are a whole lot of very specific things around open meeting law. We could spend 2 hours just talking about that, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to touch on some pieces of open meeting law where it rubs with board communication. So okay, you're a public body, you need transparency. That's at the heart of it. So anytime a quorum holds a meeting, you need to have minutes, you need to warn the meeting, have an agenda, have that agenda publicly available. There are different time periods allowed, and somebody needs to be taking minutes, which also need to be posted even before they're approved at the next meeting. Draft minutes need to be posted, again, somewhere that's easily accessible to anybody who wants them. And that, by the way, and I spelled that out on this slide, that includes board committees. If it is a board committee, you are bound by open meeting law. If you, as a board member, are serving on another committee, let's say it's a select board committee of some kind, they're subject to open meeting law, but you don't need to be. If you're serving on the Boy Scouts Council Committee, that's not a public body. And so even though you're a board member who's placed there to be the conduit with the school board, you're not subject to open meeting laws in that context. And there's language in the law about that. And so they define meetings, and they define, there's actually what is a meeting and what is not a meeting. So a meeting can occur anywhere. It's a work session, it's a retreat, it's any kind of meeting of this board or subset of a quorum subset of this board. And it doesn't need to all take place in one time and place. So email strings, social media discussions, all of that stuff, right? And here's one little exception. So you can send a group email. Jim or Libby can send out an email. Are there thoughts for the agenda for the next meeting? Here's the draft. I'm attaching the draft. Anybody have anything you want to add, delete, subtract, clarify, whatever? You can have that conversation about the agenda in group emails. But you may not discuss any business of the board in that email. So if you want clarity around an agenda item, you can ask for clarity, but it's going to stop short of discussing the item. It needs to stop short. And one tip that I actually learned from VSBA, which I think is a great one, is when most of the group emails here will be initiated either by the central office, by Libby or Anna, or by Jim. And in all cases, if you, instead of copying everybody, if you blind copy everybody, there's no such thing as reply all. If you reply all and people are blind copied on it, they don't get the reply. So that's a very safe way to structure a group email to make sure that you stay within those boundaries of open meeting law. Are there questions about that?
Susan, I have a question. This is Mia. We just held a town hall, budget town hall, just before this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't make any decisions at that town hall. It was really just to gather information from the public.
Mm-hmm.
So, but does that fall into, obviously it was being held as essentially open to be part of a transparent process, but I'm just curious about minutes and all those kinds of things. Like, how stringent do we voted to adjourn, I think, just to be on the safe side maybe, but just, I'm curious, was that truly a meeting of the board?
That's a great question. And I am going to give you my best answer, but I'm going to also check in with my colleagues who are attorneys and specialists in open meeting law, and I'm going to give you the right answer by email tomorrow. Okay? Let me just make myself a note.
And Susan, so you know, we warned that and we had a quorum of the board.
Okay. Yeah. So if you have a quorum of the board and you are discussing board business in the sense that you were getting the public's input on budget, it is a public meeting, but if minutes, there are really specific things that need to be included in minutes, and a whole long explanation of discussion need not be in the minutes. What needs to be in the minutes, as you said, Mia, is when there are actions. You know, there's a motion, a second, a vote. That needs to be in the minutes. Who made the motion, who made the second, and how did the vote go? But I don't believe you need to give lengthy description in minutes about discussion. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank
but
you.
I am gonna get an answer, and I'll send Jim an email tomorrow once I have an answer to that for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the point that that's still a little confusing to me is that whether or not we made any decisions feels to me like a defining characteristic of a meeting, but I would love a little more clarification on that.
Fair enough. Thank you. I can also direct you, there are on our website, we did a really, I thought, very informative webinar last winter before the pandemic about open meeting law. And it was held, there were two presenters. One was our executive director, Sue Siglowski, who's an attorney, and the other was the Deputy Secretary of State, and he was great. And the two of them together dealt with a lot of the minutia issues and answered a lot of very specific questions. And all of our webinars are archived on our website. And the PowerPoint deck that they used is also there. So you might want to take a closer look at that at some point. It ran about an hour.
Hey, Susan,
Yeah.
Ryan here.
Yeah.
Could I ask you to expand maybe a little bit on open meeting law and distribution of materials? Policy committee gets itself stuck in some gray areas frequently. The way we tend to operate is we'd have somebody who might be a lead author on a draft policy. We would warn a meeting of the policy committee to discuss that draft policy. So the lead author would distribute whatever had been authored so far. In advance of the meeting, the other committee members would have a chance to read it and make comments, but nothing would be shared back and forth. So we would make comments, we would make edits as a group in an open meeting.
That's fine.
The question that we're kind of bumping up against that we don't have a solid answer for is how files might be stored. So as board members, we all have access to the district's online drives. If we have a folder that drafts policies are jointly available to all policy committee members, is that an okay procedure, an okay?
I believe that is okay as long as nobody is working on them. If they're just stored there, that should be fine, because you're only advancing them in public meeting.
Is there any time that there might be a file, an informational organizational file to keep track of adoption dates, revisions, that could be jointly edited throughout without open meeting law?
No.
No. So there's no point in time that board members could have access to a document that would be opened or edited or changed outside of an openly warned meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
And Susan, sorry, just to follow up on that question, this is Mara. What would we have to do to change that?
You'd have to change the open meeting law.
Right, so that would be something to discuss with legislature themselves.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Frankly, I don't see that happening. But good luck. I mean, if you really want to pursue that, good luck. I think you know, and let's remember, legislature is bound by open meeting law also, and it is an inconvenience for a public body to adhere to some of the really stringent requirements, but it is all done with the intent of accountability.
Oh yeah, definitely agree. I just, I keep thinking about like the view all capacity, and if things were made publicly available to be accessed and viewed at any time, not that I need to tell this to you because you can't change anything, but that's something that I feel like it's not worth setting the issue down when we are in 2020 and electronic communication and co-work is part of the reality of how we function.
I understand that completely. And I know the frustrations of not being able to just make those changes in the Google Doc rather than marking up a copy for yourself and being able to discuss them in the committee meeting. I understand it's not efficient, but it is transparent that way. So it's bulky.
I have a follow-up as well, because so you're hearing from the policy committee right here. We've had a lot of talks around this. But one other question that I had was, I thought you also mentioned that you could email back and forth with a quorum of the board to develop an agenda. Now, would that be true with a shared Google Doc, that you would be able to develop that agenda? You know, as long as you're not making any decisions or trying to build consensus, would you be able to collaborate on, say, an agenda?
The official answer is I don't know, but I think you're getting into the weeds when you start to do that, because generally speaking, any shared authoring that isn't happening simultaneously in public is
suspect.
It's going to raise red flags. If you're doing that, what else are you doing? Yeah. Even if you're not doing anything else. And I don't think it's all that much more cumbersome for either Jim or Libby to send out the draft agenda and say, please send me your feedback, you know, if there's anything you want to add, because at the end of the day, they have, it's their choice whether something's going to go on the agenda or not. So if you add it on, that doesn't mean it's going to stay there.
Yeah, no, and that's the way to deal with the agenda is, you know, if you see the agenda, you want something added, you have questions, you know, email Livy and me, and we'll either add it or we'll explain why it can't be added. And if you disagree at the beginning of the meeting, you can say, I want to add this to the agenda, and, you know, bring it to the board.
If you guys want, I just pulled up the Secretary of State updated Jim Condos, his office updated their open meeting guide last year, and they have a section on collective editing of online documents. Do you want me to email that out to everyone or read that? And this is just the Secretary of State, but he is the official managing Vermont's democracy. So
no, he's my resource. You know, he's the definitive.
Yeah, especially since we're all working remotely this way and are probably going to continue to collaborate this way for a while. Yeah, I'd love to see that.
The crux of it is that they don't. He doesn't recommend. The office does not recommend that a quorum of a public body should participate in collectively editing a document, because we can't assume, for example, that all members of the public will have the skills or means to access the tools such as Google Docs or be able to offer their opinions on the views exchanged. In our view, an acceptable alternative is to instead name a point person who collects and compiles each member's comments for later discussion at a duly warned meeting. But this kind of falls outside of some of what you're talking about, I think. And I totally get where you're coming from, Mara, with regard to this is like the most inefficient way to do business in the 21st century when we're all holed up at home and we're working in this digital sphere. So how to balance, you know, the efficiency of doing this work with transparency, accountability, and accessibility. It's a fine needle to thread, but I do think it's worth prodding at because many of these laws are older.
I will also remind those of you who don't know that when the pandemic hit, there were temporary modifications made to open meeting law to allow, for example, this meeting tonight. The base open meeting law, which we're going to go back to when the state of emergency is over, says you can hold a remote meeting, but one person of the body, of the public body, must be in a central location, attending the meeting there, where the public can also gather. Now that's been pushed aside temporarily, and instead we're sharing Zoom links, but every meeting still has to be open publicly, and you have to have some mechanism for public comment. And then it complicates the whole executive session question too, right? How do you do that, making sure that you're only board members or invited people into your executive session? So there's another challenge there, but they did make some temporary modifications. And may I compliment Jim, because I've gone to a lot of Zoom board meetings in the last 6 months, and you are one of the very few who is actually doing the roll call voice vote for every motion, which is what the parameters are for digital meetings now. And so thank you for doing that. Yeah, this is a rat's nest. Open meeting law has so many ramifications, and boards get into some weeds about this with certain issues. And one of them is that group editing question. It comes up all the time. It seems so wrong on some level, and yet the intent makes the protocols at least understandable. So executive session is another one. This is where most boards get into trouble with open meeting law. The open meeting law lists 14 very specific reasons for executive session, and only those 14. And if you vote to go into executive session, you really need to include in the motion the language, specific language in open meeting law that covers which of those 14 is the reason for your open meeting, for your executive committee, executive session. Why are you closing this to the public? Well, because premature knowledge, let's say you're negotiating with the new bus company or something, premature knowledge could influence the outcome of that negotiation. And so that's one of the rationales. I'm not going to go through the particulars, but the motion needs to state the nature of the business, why you're in executive session, and you have to vote on that. Are we going into executive session? And that motion needs to be in your minutes. If when you're in executive session, you don't take minutes because you don't make any decisions in executive session. Any information in executive session, any discussion needs to, first of all, remain confidential, first and foremost. You can't tell anybody what you talked about. Forgetting the outcomes. You just can't even say, oh yeah, well, we were talking about a bus contract. Nope. Executive session, closed door. It's up to the board to decide who you might want to invite in with you to executive session. So if this is a personnel issue that around 3 people, you might want to have all 3, but only if it meets the parameters of one of those 14 reasons. Don't take minutes in the executive session, because then you run the risk of losing the confidentiality. And because you don't take any action, it's okay. If you are going to take action on something that was discussed in executive session, you need to come out of executive session, go back into open session, and somebody makes a motion that the board votes on. So all of the decision making is transparent. So as I said, we have some modifications, temporary modifications now. One, the designated physical location that has been temporarily waived. You need to make sure that the public has a way in. So I think now almost all, not all, but almost all of these platforms have a way to call in by phone. So if somebody doesn't have a device or doesn't have internet or whatever, they can still participate in the meeting. And I was impressed with your agenda. You're really clear on how to access the meeting, download the app and all of that. And you must be recording your meetings. That's part of this temporary thing. If it's at all possible, they need to be recorded and those recordings become public. Questions about any of that? Okay. So this is my very favorite expression. A board meeting is a public meeting, but it is not a meeting of the public. What does that mean? It means when you have a lot of people who want to speak at your meeting in your public comments, that's fine. But it is not the place to get into dialogue with somebody who's not on the board on an issue that they raise that may or may not be on your agenda, that may or may not be a board issue to begin with, that you have not had time to prepare for. It derails the public body, it derails the board from conducting the meeting and addressing the business that is on the agenda. And that is your job at your board meeting, is to complete your agenda. So you're going to listen to what people have to say. It may lead to a future agenda item. It may lead to some other discussion at some other time. It may lead to some public forum, but it's not the time to engage. So if you're expecting a whole lot of people to come out because you're dealing with some contentious issue and everybody wants to speak, that's fine. And it's fine to also set up some parameters for that public comment period so you can limit them. And you just need to be really clear up front what the rules are. Everybody who's here can speak once. You get 2 minutes, and please refrain from repeating what somebody before you has said, or it's going to be a really long night. And then keep to it. 2 minutes. Thank you. Next. Thank you. Next. Okay. I don't think this board gets into that. So let me ask you this question, and this is a real question. You can think about this and let me know. Are public comments at your meetings a good way to judge the community, how they're feeling on an issue? Anybody?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you.
Generally, no.
Because?
You oftentimes get the loudest voices. A lot of times you get people who have a particular issue that they're very concerned about, but it might not be representative of what others are feeling. And it's a very unrepresentative sample.
Yeah, it's not scientific representation of your communities. And it's really hard sometimes if you're hearing the same thing over and over and over again to not walk away and say, well, the community thinks blah, 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 because you've just had an earful from a few community people who are voicing their opinions, which they're entitled to voice. But that to extrapolate and say, oh, that must mean that's how everybody's thinking is a very, very risky thing to do. If you want to take the temperature of your community, have a town hall or send out a survey or, ask the questions. Don't just wait for people who will volunteer to show up and offer their opinion, because you can't count on that being at all representative.
Yeah, and one thing I would just kind of suggest is a test for that is if you are hearing, like, ask your neighbors what they're thinking. and ask, people you see and seek diverse opinions and see if the voices that are coming across your email and maybe some social media feeds and at the meetings, see if those sentiments are reflected in kind of the more random samples you might take just out about the town when we can go out about the town again. But sometimes that's a slightly good kind of test of whether whether there's a broader sentiment you're hearing or not.
And that's true. You're at least then seeking more input. I will caution, though, that one's sphere of existence may not be a really good reflection. And I think that our recent political contests are a pretty good demonstration of that. People tend to surround themselves with people who share their thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's why I said, try to diversify it a little. Don't just ask your peer group, but
yeah,
maybe ask some people that you wouldn't, that you feel a little less comfortable seeking.
If you have that opportunity, that is sure.
Exactly.
Sure.
Susan, I have a question that maybe does not really have an answer, but just something I'm wrestling with, which is I agree with you that that public comments at the meeting are not a good way to judge the community's opinion. Certainly, especially if one person shows up meeting after meeting and shares the same opinion. But I guess the thing that I wrestle with is it's still worth taking it seriously somehow. And that's, I think, definitely, today is my very first board meeting. So I'm very glad to be
welcome. I'm
learning from you tonight. And that's just something that I keep holding is what does the board do about taking someone who cares enough about this to come to us and say, this really matters to me. How do we take that seriously? And in balance, know also that it's not necessarily the community's opinions.
Mm-hmm. Well, if it's an issue that the board is already grappling with, let's say it's a particular element of a budget. Okay, I'll give you an example from my own experience. When I served on a school board, we had a couple of board members who decided that we needed artificial turf on our playing fields. And this was a large board. And these couple of people got the parents of all the football players mobilized. And I don't know what it's like in Montpelier, but I'll tell you, the football parents, you don't want to mess with these people where I live, right? And they got it together and they went off. And they decided they were going to raise half the funds privately and that the board could match it. And they developed this whole plan with one of the school board members' ears. Okay. And it really complicated things when the board had to really assess the value of the investment, the money of the investment, and the timing of it relative to other things that the board prioritized in providing for the district to aligned with the vision that we were working towards. And at the end of the day, the board voted against putting that bond out. And it was very, very difficult because those people who were for it were the ones who were showing up to every meeting and they were bringing homemade muffins and they were really going for it. And it reminded me that it's a challenge. It's a challenge to decipher what's going on and who's behind it and how loud are their voices. And so, well, I shouldn't say, so the first time we passed it and the bond went out and the bond failed miserably. And so then they wanted to do a revised version. And that's when the board said, okay, enough of this. This is not the time. So, in that case, the board was swayed by what we saw going on in the public, but it was not representative. I don't know if that helps you at all. So you have to sort of weigh it against everything else that the board knows that the public doesn't. You know, they can come to every meeting and they can watch everything that they watch, but they're not going to understand the texture and the issues that you're grappling with as a board the way you're going to understand them from the inside.
I will say also that over the years, just, you know, my son is now in 8th grade, so I've been sort of paying attention to school board matters for that many years. And I think sometimes when you have a small group of people, it can actually be representative of the community values or feelings on an issue. And I understand what you're saying about the statistical significance of having a couple of people arrive to a meeting and talk about something. But that's sort of the same that we've been running into with town meetings and broader public meetings that we've been hosting. You know, we're not getting a statistical significant number of people attending those things either. So I think Jim's sort of right. It's like you do the best you can to, I mean, short of running a statistically significant survey where you're really trying to get a broad understanding of the community's opinion on something. And even then you can't guarantee that everyone's going to respond to that survey. So, you know, I think as elected officials, we do our best to, like you said on an earlier slide, to represent the people in the community. And sometimes if your sphere happens to be reflective of certain values, maybe you're the representative of the board to those people, you know, and if you're not, maybe you'll get voted out.
Right. And I think that, you know, in the best of all possible circumstances, you do have enough representation on the board that you speak with different voices for different opinions in the community. I mean, it's rare that everybody is of like mind on a board, even if every vote ends up being unanimous. If you get to consensus regularly, that doesn't mean that's where you started out. It means that you really deliberated and discussed all parameters, all aspects of an issue before making a collaborative decision. And I think you do have to trust that you do represent your sphere, you know. As I'm looking around, I will say, and this is there anybody serving on this board who does not have children, currently have children in the system?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I think that's a really, really important voice that often is overlooked, especially around budget planning. You know, something crazy like 78% of Vermonters don't have school-age children. Think about that for a minute. And those are the people.
Is that because a lot of them are school-aged children?
No, it's because we have an older population.
I see.
But it's been true for a really, really long time. But those are the people who are voting on your budgets. So if they don't have kids in the school, they have a different interest in the budget, right? They don't care about whether this particular second grade teacher's contract is getting renewed. They care about our kids are learning, our schools are on the right path to understanding what the future needs will be for these children as they become adults, and what kind of education they are going to need to help take them there. And doing so in a way that makes me as a taxpayer feel that my money is being well spent. That's a really different approach. And it's really one, so you non-parents, it's budget season, speak up. Speak up at your budget meetings. You are representing a really important constituency in that instance. I know where I live, when I was on board, we had the equivalent of a town hall. We did it jointly with our select board, and we both presented budgets. And then we did it again at town meeting. But one of the things that we didn't do and should have done is traveled to, we happen to have a couple of senior residences in my town, and we should have gone there and presented there, because those are people who can't necessarily get out. Well, nowadays nobody can, but who aren't necessarily mobile or wanting to drive at night or show up to the schools unfamiliar. And yet these are the people who vote. And so it's really important that you're hearing from them and speaking to them. And so when you announce your town halls and when you are looking to get input from people, make sure you go past your community of parents in notifications and that kind of thing. Make sure it's, that you're speaking to everybody, because it's really easy to forget that. So email and social media. And I know I'm over time, so you can tell me to stop anytime. Jim, I'm leaving that to you.
Let me just query Libby, because I don't want to go much past 8:30. Are we expecting the policy readings and policy monitorings to go pretty quickly? We are? Okay.
We don't have
go ahead, Susan. Maybe we'll try to wrap up at 8:15 or so, though.
Okay.
We don't have anything to say about some of the policies, so because we have.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a snare ahead that I was unaware of.
Okay, I'll go really quickly, but still.
Well, let me ask another question of the board. Does any board member plan to raise any big issues with the policy reading or the policy monitoring? Okay, good. Then why don't you take to like 8:20, Susan, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm going to go fast, but I want your questions are the most important thing. Okay. So let's make sure we have that discussion. And if we don't finish, we don't finish. So we've already addressed a lot of this. The group email is okay if you're discussing the agenda or to distribute materials for a meeting, but you may not talk about a meeting. Don't do the following: group emails discussing board business or collective editing or participation in a Facebook group or front porch forum by a quorum of the, if it's about school business. Well, what does about school business mean? It means anything having to do with the schools, because most people don't understand where the board's authority ends, and they will always see you as answering for the board. So that one's a tricky one, because if there's a community group and 6 of you want to be part of it because you're part of the community, that's fine, as long as you don't get into the discussions about the schools. So if they're talking about some pocket park that they want to put on Main Street, that's fine. But if they're talking about even something as innocuous as naming your baseball field, stay out of it, which is easy to do. It's a lot harder to do when they're talking about something they think you've done wrong, right? And they're being really critical. So this is our world now, right? This is a little out of date here, but this has taken over. We all know that, and we certainly know it in the last 8 months, right? The statistics are crazy. I can't remember exactly what it was about the number of people who rely on Facebook as their primary source of news. Primary. It's frightening. So with all of that, and with open meeting law, this is where they collapse, okay? So be careful of that last one. Don't use social media as a way to talk to each other. That's a really risky thing to do. So here are some guidelines. If you wouldn't want to see what you're saying in print on the newspaper, don't say it in social media or email or blogging or tweeting. Executive session, we've already talked about. Really bend over backwards to make sure you're not engaging that a quorum of you is not engaging in something that could be construed as school business. make sure you understand your policies around electronic communications. They tend to be less about board communications and more about student and teacher. And this last one, protect your personal email from public records requests by utilizing school district email. So as a public body, you are subject to public records requests. That means anybody for no reason at all can ask to see all your emails. If you're not separating out your personal from your school board work, then you're going to have to turn them all over, which is why we strongly advocate for using a school board email address. It means even if you have them all coming into one inbox, as I do, it means you can isolate them. And if somebody decides that they think that the board has violated open meeting law and that you've been communicating via email about X, Y, or Z, and they want to see all board emails between any board members from, April 12th until June 17th, they're going to get to see them all. So if you don't want them knowing what you're doing in your personal life, just keep them separate. It's easy enough to do. All right, so let's go to Facebook, okay? And here's this fictitious community watch group, okay? COVID-19's out of control. Why is it safe for our kids to be in school when the governor just said everyone who can work remotely should? Schools should be dismissed like they were last spring to ensure the safety of our children, right? This is somebody's post on Facebook. You happen to be a member. 6 of you happen to follow this group. Why is this not working? There we go. So I then am going to say, well, the whole state's trying to make sure it's safe for kids to be in school. The governor said public school's a need. We can forego the wants like public gatherings so students can go to school and they can be safe. My comment is now a matter of public record. My Facebook post. Because remember, a meeting doesn't have to have a place, it doesn't have to have a time, it doesn't have a duration, it's always, and I'm a school board member. And here's the even worse part. Somebody else chimes in after me, that's public record too. So if 3 of you or 4 of you are chiming in, defending the board's actions, right? Because there's legitimacy to defending them and it's so tempting, you're in trouble with your open meeting law and your public records. So best practice, stay out of it. If you need to follow it to see what people are saying, fine, but don't participate. And again, if one person is going to be the board spokesperson, then that's the one person who should be participating or delegating. In this case, if Jim, if you're not a social media person and somebody else is, and you feel that that can be delegated, that's fine. But you are not able to take off your school board hat on Facebook. So you're always a school board member. Now, if you're acting as your own self among your friends and venting, I mean, I would say that's probably not a great vehicle for it anyway, but you're having a frustration with your kids' schooling and you want to vent about it, find another way to do it. Just save yourself the angst of it. Okay, and this is an important piece down at the bottom there. If there's a quorum of you on this group, whether you're all physically online at the same time or not, and you end up getting involved in school business, it's an unwarned meeting. Major red flag with open meeting law. And I'm going to ask you this question too. Is this a good way to judge communities' opinions? Facebook or Twitter? In the interest of time, I will say, no, it's a bad way.
God, I hope not.
Right. I mean, first of all, people feel unfiltered, right? They can say anything. We've seen that repeatedly. And second of all, just like the loud people who show up at your meeting, you're going to have the loud people on Facebook, right? So don't use that as a representation of what your community's thinking, because it's the angry people who are getting riled up if there's something they don't like. So be really, really careful about it. And I will tell you honestly, in the last year, I personally know of 2 instances of school officials, one an employee and one a board member, who violated this, who used Facebook inappropriately.
Wasn't there a principal who got, yeah.
The principal was fired and a board member has been censured, and they're trying to figure out how to get him off the board, which you really, that's a whole other story. We won't go there.
So I do have a specific question about this. So again, back to this budget town hall, you know, we warned it, the district warned the town hall, and I posted the warning. There is a Facebook page, as you probably know, that is Friends of Montpelier-Roxbury Public Schools. I simply posted the warning as a way of putting the warning further out there. Did I just break open meeting?
No, because you didn't offer any, you merely presented information.
Correct. Yeah. I did not offer my opinion. I just said, this is happening, please join us. Okay.
Right. You didn't engage in a discussion on anything. You just provided fact.
Okay.
Yeah, and the same is true with email. If you know, there's a group email on what time's the meeting, that's fine. Or something logistic, like when we meet in person again, we have meetings in Roxbury. So you could ask, you know, can we carpool? And coordinate a carpool there. But then do not talk about board business in the carpool, because that would be an unimportant meeting. But you can coordinate logistics and share information.
Right. And I'll tell you, in some, particularly the smaller rural towns around the state, where they tend to have small boards, if they've got a 5-person board and 3 of them go out to lunch together, they're hosed, because that's a quorum. Even if they're best friends and they've known each other their whole lives, and you know, they have to be careful. You know, you guys aren't confronted with that. A, you're a bigger board, and B, it's not likely that you're all in the same social group. But you know, these things are awkward at best. Okay, so I've covered off a lot. And tried to keep it all through that lens of what's it okay to say and what's it not okay to say. Did I leave out any scenarios that you guys want to talk about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm also new to the board, and
excellent. Love new board member.
We've talked quite a bit about open meeting law, so I'm pretty familiar with it. I've done reading. I'm just wondering, so in terms of, you are allowed to talk to each other outside of meetings, one-on-one.
But not about board business.
But not about board business.
Right.
So you're never allowed to have a conversation about anything happening with the schools with another board member, even if it's just one other person.
Best practice would be not to.
So even if it's not a quorum, you just have 2 board members who want to discuss something. Best practice is not to this.
It's, you know, it's, to me, it's a gray area. It's true. If you don't have a quorum, officially it's okay, but then you get into the situation, and I've seen it happen, where one board member has an agenda on a particular item. And so they go and they talk to each of the other board members individually. And then they come back and they say at the meeting, well, I talked to everybody and everybody said blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden you've got people in town who are raising open meeting violation questions. Even though nobody actually violated it, gives the appearance of doing board work outside of an open meeting.
So I'm a little confused as how that relates to earlier we were talking about editing a document, and it was suggested, I forget if it was from you, that perhaps one board member be in charge of writing the document and then surveying other board members to get input on the document. So if we were rewriting a policy, if one person were the person to draft the policy, I might reach out to the other members to get input, but that's
they're at the meeting.
At the meeting only.
Right.
Not outside of it.
Right.
So there have been a couple of times where I've reached out as a new board member being confused about stuff or wanting to clarify things, reached out to Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? So you can only talk to Jim outside of board meetings about school
so
issues.
if you were asking for background on an issue that was in front of the board or detail about the budget process, if you were not deliberating an issue, a current issue that the board is confronting, then that would be training, really, right? I mean, you're learning what you need to know to be doing your job. So that's different than deliberating on an issue.
So I think what I hear you saying is that it's technically allowed to talk to other board members individually about board business, but that it can be a slippery slope.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, and certainly if you were to then show up at a board meeting and say, well, I think this has been decided, because one of the things that is defined in open meeting is that decisions are made by the board. So clearly, if like Jim and I were to have a conversation about busing, Jim and I cannot make the decision for the board about busing. And so I can't show up at the board and be like, well, Jim and I talked about this, so clearly it's done.
Right, but if you individually also then talk to Jill and Mara and Andrew and Emma separately, one-on-one, and then sit down at the meeting and say, well, I've already talked to the majority of board members and they agree with me that this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
That's where you get into the slippery
Right, that definitely seems problematic. Yeah.
Yes. Even if it's not technically problematic, it has the appearance of being problematic.
Well, it has the appearance of having that discussion privately, which in fact is what you did when it should be an open discussion. And
but you are allowed to talk to your neighbors or friends about board business one-on-one.
Right, because you're informing them typically of what the board is grappling with or
gathering information.
Or gathering information. Right.
So this is Aniket. Just so I guess to play devil's advocate, am I hearing that it's in the strictest sense, it's okay to talk to the other board members and have, exchange information one-on-one and come back and say, now give the appearance, again, I'm playing devil's advocate, in the board meeting that we've talked, but at the same time, you have exchanged ideas and, you've talked about it with one-on-one with 4 different members. And then come decision time, you will, it's an open setting where you're making that decision. And you probably are having discussion and whatnot, but there is some discussion or some interchange of ideas that's happened outside, and that technically is okay.
Well, that's really the part you want to avoid, is when there's energy for it outside. And the idea that you talked individually with people, but collectively it was a majority of you. I'm not an attorney and I don't want to guess which side of right and wrong that comes down to, but the spirit of the law would suggest that that's not a good idea. right?
Susan, I just realized on this, touching on exactly what you're talking about, the Secretary of State has a little guidance on it that they put under the term, which is a really good term. They've clearly thought a lot about this, serial communications.
Perfect.
And what they say is, are you all right with me reading this?
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's make this point and wrap up.
Yeah.
It says, the open meeting law does not explicitly address serial communications, also known as serial meetings, walking quorums, or daisy chain communications. We generally recommend that board members avoid engaging in successive, interrelated, private conversations about the board's business that, taken together, involve a quorum. And it goes on to say that because the law seems to allow for gathering over time, these types of communications can be risky if used to develop consensus. And I think the whole thing there that they really emphasize is that when they're successive and they're interrelated, they can potentially form a quorum. So what they seem to be saying, they say, of course we understand that individual board members and administrators need to work between meetings. So, and to educate themselves on matters under their jurisdiction. And they're not raising an issue about that. Where the Secretary of State is drawing the line is with these serial communications that involve a quorum. They say that's where it gets questionable as to whether there could be a public meeting violation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that really just corroborates what we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a great resource. So I do want to wrap up. If you have lingering thoughts or questions, I am always available to you. You guys, your dues to VSBA pays my salary, so I'm yours. Oops. That's me. That's how you can reach me. That is my cell phone number at home, which is where I'm working. And I hope that you all know how to reach us at VSBA. And for those of you who are very new, I really encourage you in your spare time to spend a little bit of time on our website. There's all kinds of great resources there that might help you become more comfortable with this unusual role that a school board plays in the district, in the community, and in the law. For those of us who aren't legal experts, it's something new to understand. So I leave you with that. I owe you an answer to one question, which I will get out to Jim in the morning. I thank you very much for your time. And please, any of you, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. And especially for some of you who are newer, but for all of you, we do a monthly webinar on a different topic every month. And if you haven't had the chance, we do them from 12 to 1 on the first Thursday of every month. You should all be getting emails from us. If you're not, please let me know. We may not have the right email address. As I said in the beginning, one of our biggest missions is to help boards do their work. So if you're a new member and you're feeling a little at sea, let us know. We'll help you out. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I hope you get through the rest of your agenda. I'm out of here.
Great. Thank you, Susan. We really appreciate it. And we definitely will have you back.
Thanks, Susan.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Jim, what is the process to follow to request one of the books that Susan referenced?
Yeah, I'd like one too.
We can get it for you. Tell me a number.
There's Mia and Jill requesting them. Anyone else?
We'll get a few. I think I have some on my bookshelf, so we'll get a few in stock and get it out to you.
Great. Thank you. So third reading of the electronic communication between employees and students policy and the C12 prevention of sexual harassment is prohibited by Title IX. Any comments or edits to those? No? Great. Read thirdly. And policy monitoring, expectations of MRPS board members, which arrived a little late, courtesy of my oversight. The G14 class size policy, and then the F12 diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. Any comments on those before entertain a motion to approve them?
I have one quick comment on the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. Libby, you mentioned that right now there's a freeze on data coming from the state. I'm just wondering, can you briefly expound upon that? That caught my attention.
Well, we never got the youth risk behavior survey for our schools. We've gotten them for the county we just haven't gotten it for the school broken up by schools. And they wrote an email to us today saying they were going to delay the YRB survey for this year until the spring. And we were like, well, we never got the data for last year, so that's fine by us to delay it. And then last year we didn't have we never took SBAC or Next Gen, so we don't have up-to-date state standardized testing. And quite honestly, in the spring last year, we wouldn't have the best data to share with the board. So typically by this time in the school year, I would have shared academic data with you all, as well as academic goals. We're in a different, the place that we're in right now in regards to our data collection and our knowledge of what data is a very uncomfortable place for me right now, because we just don't have good data at the moment because of what happened in the spring and because of where we are now. Although we're getting it now, we're getting our feet underneath us right now. So fingers crossed we can stay in school so we can continue that process. So it's totally on me and the principals. We're just putting more things on our teachers. It's a bit hard. We are having day-to-days starting in December with each of our buildings. So hopefully we'll be able to get a clearer picture, but we're not in the same place we usually are with goal development, goal attainment. We're just not in the same place where we usually are.
Any other comments?
I just have a couple of questions. What does SBAC stand for?
SBAC
Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium.
Oh, look at Jill.
Thanks, Jill.
It's the standardized test that we have to take in Vermont.
Got it.
That assesses the Common Core state standards.
Got it. And just a clarification on the class size stuff. I saw that the kindergarten through really like second grade are pretty small, and I just couldn't tell, do we know if COVID is impacting that? Like, is it, there are 5 classrooms in the building and then there's one more so we're actually spread out over 6 classrooms, or is it 5 classrooms total? Just as like a hypothetical example.
The only one that we know for sure that COVID has influenced, or no, I shouldn't say that we highly believe that COVID has influenced is our kindergarten numbers, because kindergarten isn't a mandatory grade level in Vermont. So parents may have just not registered their kids, which is completely within their purview to do. And so our kindergarten numbers are considerably lower this year than they have been in the past, and we're not sure why, because we wouldn't have had access to those parents beforehand unless they were in our pre-K. So the other numbers are pretty good. The other numbers are inclusive of the virtual and in person, and we could get the home study numbers, but it wouldn't influence it that much.
Right. And so I think there's maybe 5 first grade classrooms. If you're saying there's 5 first grade classrooms and you say that's inclusive of virtual, that means there's maybe 4 in the building and 1 class is virtual.
I'm counting my first grade teachers in my head right now.
Yeah, I was just picking first grade as like not to be specific, but.
Yeah, so our classroom size right now for first grade across with our classrooms the way they are about 13 in a class. 12
yeah. Okay.
Class.
Yeah.
I think I caught just a minor typo on the class size report as well. For grade 3 at UES, you're showing optimal class size as 17, but in the policy, it states that 3 and 4 are at an optimal average per grade cluster at 22.
I'd have to look more closely at it. I don't have it pulled up. right here. I was going off of Grant. Grant puts an enrollment chart together, and I was going off of that. So it may just be a little bit different language.
I know it was changed fairly recently. The optimal class size in the policy was changed fairly recently. But I think it used to be K through 3, and now it's K through 2, and then 3 and 4 are separated out.
I'll have to look. I'm not sure. And I do want to say the DEI policy, I said we're in non-compliance because it's a huge policy, and we're just not there yet. And so when I say we're in non-compliance, it's not on a shame on us kind of way. We're working really hard on that. Just we're not there yet. And I honestly don't know if we'll ever be there.
Yeah, no, New York.
Or should we be, right? We're always working on that one. So that's a different type of policy. So I wanted the board just to make sure we heard that.
Hey, Libby, real quick, I don't remember in the original discussions about the class size policy preschool numbers coming up into the discussion.
It's not in our class size policy.
But should it be? Would it help in terms of number of teachers or number of rooms to have a defining number for the preschool class as well?
I'm not sure if it should be because it's the preschool has so many different laws to it than than starting in kindergarten on up. It's like, because it works with both human services and the Agency of Education at the state level. And so those two things have a lot of different rules. So the preschool class size may be mandated by other rules. Sure. So policy may not be necessary.
Yeah, like I said, I don't remember, but it was when you had started making the comment about COVID having the biggest impact on something. The first thing that jumped into my mind was the preschool numbers because parents just chose not to send their kids, but preschool wasn't in there. And I just couldn't remember why preschool wasn't included.
Yeah, that's just, my bet would be that it's in the law.
Only so many kids.
We have like so many feet to a bathroom in a law. I would imagine that class size is also there.
I think you're right.
Yeah. But you're also right, Ryan, in that, especially at Roxbury, our pre-K numbers were drastically influenced by COVID this year, and a bit at UES as well. It was the first year that we didn't have a wait list at UES, I think.
Yeah, it's one more year, right?
Yep. Other questions or motion to approve the reports?
I move to approve the policy monitoring reports for policies A03, G14, and F22.
Thanks. A second?
I'll second.
Aniket?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Mia?
Aye.
Mara?
Aye.
Emma?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Right. Motion to adjourn. Mara, do you want to make it since this is?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Have a second?
I have one little thing.
Yes.
You had mentioned finding a mentor for me. And I was just going to say, maybe in the interest of both time and not putting anybody on the spot, maybe we could just say, if they're interested in doing that, which I would love to have one, they email you and then you pair us up. And Perfect. If there's more than one, they can thumb wrestle for it or something. I don't know.
I have also never heard of this mentor idea and have not been appointed a mentor.
And we might need a third. Now we might need a third. Anyway, this seems like a good thing to just handle over email, maybe.
Ryan, Jim, and Andrew, you're up.
Perfect.
It's a logistical thing. It's a logistical thing. It seems like we wouldn't be breaking open meeting laws.
Our board I'm happy to do policy that we have just approved our compliance with indicates that we're supposed to have mentors.
Yes.
Who's my mentor?
That's it over email. I'm happy to be a mentor to either of you. So
Jim, aren't you my mentor?
I think I'm your mentor as well.
He's doing an excellent job too.
We talked a couple times.
No,
found some questions off.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do that by email. Do I have a second on the motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
Annika?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Mia?
Aye.
Mara?
Aye.
Emma?
Aye.
And Andrew?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again in Zoom world.
Sounds
Thanks.
great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mara.
Take care, Mara.
Best.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mara.
bye,
You're
Mara.
the best.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. You have not heard the last of me.
Yes.
Hope you strong arm us with love.
All right, Miss Anna, see you tomorrow.
Good night.